Hello, everybody. It's me, Fee, White Zulu, and I want to welcome you to another chapter of, another chapter of Okavango Diary. And I hope you're enjoying these readings. I want to welcome you all. And if you are enjoying them, please share or press the like button or whatever people do if they want to. I'm sorry, I'm a bit Diomaka today. I haven't got any words in front of me to read, so I'm doing this off the cuff. However, this is a greeting to you all and a welcome, and I hope that you enjoy these chapters that I'm reading out. They go out twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, if all goes well, and enjoy them. And thank you so much for listening to them. Share them around. Thank you and goodbye. I can no longer give you the dates as I've been banned from using the manageress's desk and computer. I've also noticed that she doesn't know how to use it because she writes out all the orders and provision lists by hand. So it just sits there gathering dust. So much for her personal things getting... I've lost my place. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Sorry, folks. I'm not perfect. I'm now writing my diary from memory, the same way as I did with my autobiography. Lunch was of indifferent quality. I could tell that the lettuce was limp, as I have a certain way of ensuring that lettuce is always crisp, no matter how old it is. And the salads hadn't been nearly as carefully prepared and lovingly arranged as I had taught the kitchen staff. They gave the impression of having been thrown together. The hot dish was a greasy and tasteless cottage pie, which had pools of oil that had gathered in pockets on top of the sloppy potato topping, reminding me of the cottage pie we'd had at boarding school in the 1960s. Again, I was running around pouring drinks and trying to find out whose wine belonged to whom. Most guests were accommodating and understanding of the fact that I was very new to the job. Others not so much, and they complained loudly and justifiably that the bar service wasn't up to much. Again, I forfeited my afternoon rest and to try and sort out the bar, because the next day I had to put an order through to head office of what drinks needed restocking, and I didn't know where to start. I was still battling to pour a tot from the optics, and I was still struggling horribly with the credit card machine. Deep down, I knew I wasn't up to the job, but I would somehow have to soldier on for the month. Worst of all was that in 2 days' time, we would start the early morning game excursions, which involved me getting up at 4:30 every morning to wake the guests at 5 with coffee or tea, rusks and muffins, and chivvy them into their boats at 6 at the latest, so they could get the best game viewing before it became too hot. That afternoon and evening was a repeat of the previous one. Not enough torches, missing batteries, struggling with the wine labels, and running around frantically, trying to please the guests' capacious appetites for drink, from sundowners through to the after-dinner liqueurs and brandy, right up until 1 or 2 in the morning, when we finally had to escort them back to their beds. I still couldn't tally up all the extras, which on top of an eye-watering sum, just to lay your head on the pillow for 3 nights, the guests had to pay for all their little flights, all their drinks, both soft and alcoholic, as well as all their bottled water. They were also required to tip the African staff, which I then had to divide up among the guides. We 3 white staff, the kitchen and laundry staff, got nothing, although we all worked far harder than the guides. This safari company, since it had been sold, I still had no idea what it was called, was out to wring every penny out of their guests, and no stone was left unturned in improvised and innovative ways to extract money out of them. On top of everything else, head office seemed unable to resist or turn away a single potential guest, so they kept overbooking the camp, putting guests into the pilots' huts and squeezing people in anywhere they could. We were only equipped for 16 guests, but sometimes, particularly at lunchtime, when planes were coming in and out at different hours, at those times we were up to 25 people dining and 20 staying. This put an enormous strain on the kitchen, laundry and bar staff, as we had to forego our rests practically every afternoon in order to cater for most of our very demanding guests. Many years later, in 2015, I took a trip to the Ngorongoro crater for 3 nights in a tented camp, followed by a week on the Serengeti Plains, also in tents, and finally 5 days on Zanzibar Island in the most luxurious hotel. That company was all-inclusive, and all we had to do was tip the staff. The contrast to this lodge I was working for and that wonderful holiday was remarkable, as I didn't ever feel ripped off by the latter. As I've said before, even we staff had to pay for our own uniforms, flights in and out, bottled water and every other drink, and in my case, from one camp to another, out of our pitiful salaries, paid in pula. This company was just plain greedy, and I was the one who had to receive all the justifiably bitter complaints about the extra costs. The dinner had been disastrous food-wise. The main dish, roast turkey with all the trimmings, was undercooked and raw in the middle, while the vegetables were burnt, as was the gravy. The BFH was clearly not getting any cooperation from the kitchen staff, rather the reverse. Oh, how I longed to swap places with her. I think even without Kutsi, I would have managed far better than that. By now, my head had been throbbing painfully for 3 days. That night, I didn't have the energy to bath, but flopped down on my bed and passed out, fully clothed, and forgetting even to light my mosquito coil. I slept like the dead, in spite of the mosquitoes eating me alive. But the next morning I couldn't get out of bed. My body simply refused to cooperate. I summoned up all my remaining strength, staggered down to the office in my dressing gown and slippers, and scrawled a note to the manager saying I was unwell and unable to come to work. Then, I walked unsteadily back to my hut, just in time to be sick in the loo, fell into bed and passed out again. I was woken by someone pounding on my door and bursting in. It was the BFH. "What's the matter with you?" she asked belligerently. I opened my swollen eyes a crack and said I was sick. "What exactly is wrong with you?" she asked again, suspiciously. I told her my symptoms and added that I had also been sick and had diarrhea, which was entirely truthful. "Well, you'd better spend the morning in bed then," she said grudgingly. "Remember, we have a full quota of guests, and there are some hunters flying in helicopters, and they want breakfast, lunch, and dinner and drinks here for 3 days." This was news to me, and I wondered when they were going to break it to me. I was staggered that the safari company I worked for entertained the thought of allowing big game hunters to even land at Kugana, never mind giving them hospitality in the form of drinks and meals. I assumed that the money was to be extremely good and thus irresistible. I also expected that the hunters would be sleeping under canvas somewhere outside the camp, as our lodge was completely full to the overflowing, as usual. The BFH stamped out of my hut and slammed the door. She didn't offer me any water or even some Lucozade, which I knew we had several packets of the soluble powdered kind in the pantry. This had been rather grudgingly given to the staff to drink when it was extremely hot, and I had handed out 3 of the 5 meagre packets they sent up on my request to the African staff. I was becoming dehydrated as the day progressed and the V&D continued, so I just kept filling my tooth mug with tap water and draining it. In between times I slept and slept, catching up for what had effectively been a month's sleep deprivation. Nobody came near me. It was very obvious that the African staff had been told to stay away. I knew that Leah would have sneaked up to my hut to see how I was and bring me something to eat or drink, but she was just too terrified of the BFH to risk it. The following morning, the BFH burst into my hut again, telling me that the hunters would be there in a minute and I must get up to greet them and pour them drinks. I'd had enough time to rest and recover from a tummy upset. I told her that this was a bit more than a tummy upset, as I was now running a raging fever, and even she grudgingly admitted that I looked a bit flushed. I croaked through a dry mouth and chapped lips, asking for a pint glass, telling her that I was terribly thirsty. "I'll get you a jug of Lucozade and a glass. Then I want you up to meet and look after the hunters." And she stamped out, returning with a jug which she filled from the tap, tipped in a sachet of orange powder, and handed it to me. Gratefully and thirstily I drank and drank, but then had to run to the loo, where I threw up the lot. She'd long gone by then. I crawled back into bed, my head spinning, the headache blinding me, and tried to calm myself down so the palpitations would reduce. I drifted off again, only to getting up to go to the loo to be sick again at frequent intervals. My temperature felt so high that I began to wonder if I'd contracted malaria. We couldn't take prophylactics when spending months at a time in the bush, as after 3 weeks The active ingredients in them began to create liver problems, which would eventually kill us. We had dealt with mosquito bites by spraying ourselves liberally with peaceful sleep and wearing long sleeves and long pants in the evening. The African staff had their own methods of dealing with malaria, and they ate certain leaves, took them in a tea form, or rubbed themselves on their exposed parts with other leaves, which deterred the mosquitoes from settling on them. Apparently it worked very well, as almost none of them ever got malaria. When we had had a professor of pharmacology staying with us for 3 days, he had asked me all kinds of interested questions about which leaves all plants the local river bushman tribe used for the prevention of or treating malaria. I had asked one of the guides to show him when next they went out on an excursion, and I know he took some samples back with him to try and extract the chemicals within and copy them for possible commercial use. I was woken again by the sound of helicopters flying just overhead and landing on a patch of open ground just behind my hut, where I had taken guests for a short walk and come across those huge fresh lion pug marks. There appeared to be 2 helicopters, but I was beyond caring. I was now so feverish that it was all I could do to keep my eyes open and breathe naturally, not allowing the palpitations to sweep me away into a panic attack. I was very frightened. I had no one to turn to, and all the attention shown to me by the BFH was in order to get me back on my feet and working again, prodding me as one would do to get a sick horse to stand up. The kitchen staff appeared not to be cooperating with her. I suspect they had considered going out in a full-on strike, hoping that I would be put back into the manageress's job, but were too frightened of losing their own jobs, so instead they decided to work as slowly and as badly as they could to see if she could be fired. She and her husband were also having to do my job as well. I didn't feel sorry for her one bit, as she had treated me and the entire black staff so abominably from the word go. If she had shown me a modicum of kindness and been civil to me, we might not be in this mess. After she'd come in and what I assumed was lunchtime, in order to goad me back onto my feet, I think even she realized that I was really ill. After that, she left me alone. I lay in a daze of pain and fever, and really not aware of my surroundings. I only knew that when it was night because it got dark, and I could hear an elephant browsing off the tree above my hut. I found his subsonic rumblings rather comforting. After getting out of bed to go to the loo for the umpteenth time, when I got back in again, I forgot to pull the mosquito net over me. The next thing I knew, there was a loud plop on my pillow. I grabbed my torch and shone it on what appeared to be a very big scorpion. There are plenty of scorpion species in Botswana, but the biggest one, commonly known as the granulated, thick-tailed scorpion, a large species which is dark yellow to brown in colour, is the most venomous in southern Africa, and a few people die every year from its sting. There's a gap between the top of the wall and the thatched roof, along which mice, mainly scorpions, and other creatures scuttle, and this one had fallen onto my pillow. I didn't want this thing in my bed, as it was so big. I was convinced it was the most venomous, thick-tailed one. So I grabbed the pillow with both hands like I would a tray and staggered to my door, which opened inwards. I managed to yank it open and threw the pillow, scorpion and all, out of my door simultaneously. To my surprise, the pillow bounced back in, having ricocheted off a pair of grey tree trunks, which turned out to be the front legs of an elephant. Behind him, in my torchlight, I saw a bank of eyes, which I knew to be those of a pride of lions who had made a kill sometime the night before. I might have been hallucinating, but I believed that the elephant was deliberately blocking my doorway so as to protect me from going out and straight into the jaws of the lions. In a strange way, I felt protected by him. He didn't budge, but just carried on calmly eating leaves off the top of the tree which overshadowed my hut. I was hoping that the scorpion had fallen off by then, retrieved my pillow, shook it vigorously, and went back to bed.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my videos and my stories of my life. And I want to thank John Moslane for being what I call the sound engineer, but I'm sure there's a more professional word for it. However, faithful, and for 4 years now, I think, he has been here for me every Wednesday. Well, I think it's Wednesdays, but once a week to record 2 chapters of whichever book it is I'm reading. And without him, this couldn't be done. So a big thank you to John. Also, Sean van Vuren, we send the videos to him. Sorry, I'm not reading this. I'm just doing it off the cuff. And my brain is a bit tumor. And Sean uploads them to the YouTube channel where you can find them all in playlists. He does it beautifully. And I want to thank them both for all the help that they give me. Well, it's not help. They do everything for me. And it's a great asset. So also, I have a website called whitezulubook.com, obviously www in front of it, but you'll find it there. Quite easy to find. Johnny Clegg's called The White Zulu. Mine's called White Zulu. And you will find on my website, you'll find all kinds of photographs going way back to when my ancestors settled in the Cape, 1652. Well, not photographs of them, but descriptions. This photograph of my grandmother's wedding, and lovely, lovely photos of the farm we still own. My sister sent me a photograph this morning of the farm in midsummer, and she says how beautiful it's looking. I've had a lot of rain. So, just want to thank my helpers, John and Sean, to thank you all for listening, and also please share this with everybody else. Hit the like button and enjoy. Goodbye.